Hi guys. We should have no war, we should have love, but we didn't like each other very much
I agree with
anymore.
No war, but I don't think government was based on war. I think government was based on war infighting, so to stop us infighting amongst our neighbours.
So I don't know
was...
if you've noticed, but in this country they've got like a left wing and a right wing. Yeah, and the left wing and the right wing, some think that they're better than the others because they're on the left wing and the right wing. It's the left cheek and the right cheek of the same arse.
True.
It's this is all that this is. Politics, all right. And I worked in Westminster.
The lesser evil for,
the politics is really just like the PR department for something above that. And 2020 proved that, because you've got countries that hate each other and they all lock down. Now, if you hate your business rival and he locks his business down, and you're going to go, oh, I'm going to lock down, or I'm going to double production. You know why? Because he shut his shop and I'm going to make bank while he's closed. That's what countries would have done in reality. Not, Daddy from World Health called me up and said I must shut down. No. I'm a dictator. I don't give a rat's backside about that. No. The whole world is controlled. Like I was saying to them, even the Gulf War was staged on purpose. It was created. The conditionality for that war was created. The second one and the first one. I was in a war in a country called Angola. When I wrote a book about it, a guy from Intel came and met me. He said, let me tell you that your battles were being choreographed. Where you were going to meet the enemy was being discussed by the Americans and the Russians in a hotel room in Luanda. And that really upset me, because we were fighting life and death. And now I'm told that, oh, you mean my battles were not what we thought they were? They were being staged. Why? For some PR exercise? That's what the war is. Because just like they were saying about Putin, we need to, if we're going to go back to war with Russia, we need to be really frightened of what he's going to do to us. That'll be the only reason.
Provocation from both sides, I think.
But it's a ramping. But you see, so when you know flat Earth, you realize that Russia and America at the top table are best friends, and China.
I wouldn't say that.
They have never broken the Antarctic Treaty.
If they were best friends, they would have. Although they have space treaties. What I mean is they unify for space missions and stuff like that. But why would India not be included in that?
Have you ever watched boxing?
Yes.
Okay, so the guy who runs the World Boxing Federation, do you think that he cares that you and the guy that you're going to fight with hate each other? No.
That feels it, yeah.
That's what he wants. That's what he wants. And why? It's good for money. It's good for business. But both of the trainers of those teams, no, look, like these guys are gonna like feel this emotion. That's what we feel when we're in this situation. But really, I know that that trainer, me, we can go for a drink afterwards, and talk about it and what have you.
Well, you have to remember there's ego in boxing, so there's always going to be a winner and loser.
There's ego in politics.
Putin and the politicians, they don't want to be losers. They want to be winners.
Yeah. No, they do want to be winners, and I think that for a country, so in the case of Cuba, when I went to war, we destroyed a brigade in one day, and it was really embarrassing for the Cubans. So they set us up so that we would take some hits in the months ahead, so that they could take some of our tanks and parade them in Russia and Cuba and say, look what we've done to the South African forces. Yeah. We have their tanks, their turrets here. And I believe that was created so that they would have the payback, omerta. Because at the end of the day, right, if Russia wanted to take Ukraine, they could do it in a week. They could do it in a week. Do you realize how much power that Russia has at its disposal, just with its planes? Because it's staged. It has to be eked out so that the people in this country are willing to spend their tax pounds on another war, or justifying sending, because as they have done over the last year, if you watched it over the last year or two, who does it benefit?
Yeah, who would
okay, so if I'm the guy who wants to, so we've got two boxes, right? If I can see them in the Daily Mirror having a big argument months before the fight, how much more am I going to make on the door? So the people, they need us to be funding that, to coming and playing along.
Who's the one that's making money off of this?
Well, you know that George Bush, the president of America, his grandfather, Prescott Bush, was jailed for funding Hitler. The same bankers fund Hitler as Churchill. I was going to say Tom Ford. Henry Ford was providing the oil that Hitler's planes needed, without which they would not be able to fly. Ford is an American. You got to realize that when the people who are in the arms industry, they don't really mind if Iraq and Israel or some other country all buys from them, and then they send their boys to war against. They don't mind. They'd rather you were just at war and you're buying their equipment. But this is only on the material side. because for me, I think it's spiritual. I think there's these secret societies that control the game, from religion to politics to economics,
What do you
history.
think about the Iraq War then?
Which one?
The one with the Americans, about 2005, around that time?
The
Late
second
90s,
Gulf.
early
Oh, the late 90s one. Well, I thought that Saddam was a bad guy. I had 3 Iraqi refugees live with me in 1993 in Cape Town. They'd run away from Saddam Hussein. So my belief was that he was a bad guy.
Because of what you heard from the 3 refugees?
Yeah, but that was my belief. And then I see weapons of mass destruction. He's going to destroy Europe with 45 minutes weapons, and so I believe that, and I'm kind of okay with them going to war against Saddam to take Saddam out, not the people, right?
But was it Iraq or Iran? They said that they had the massive weapons of destruction just to fabricate the war.
That's right. It was Iraq. Tony Blair, Colin Powell, these people who were in charge of various things at the time, they said he's got this, and I remember it. I mean, I'm 55 now. I remember it extremely well. So, and I was like, I think we need to take this guy out, because the guys, Fadil, Ibrahim, these guys that I met from there, they were like, he's a bad guy, right? But you see, in Iraq and in all of the Middle East, in fact, these countries have been divided by who? The British. And what they've done often is that they put a minority in power of a majority. You know, so you do have these tensions between Sunni, Shia, and these different groups, right? And so they've exploited these tensions, because it's easy to get me, say I'm Everton and you're Liverpool, and it's easy to get a few, scroats out of the back streets and say, turn them into thugs who are going to create a problem for me down the line, become a jihadi or whatever. Yeah, that's not hard to do. Or if I'm spending $3,000 a month on people, I'll be able to get soldiers. I'll be able to build an army for £3,000 a month. If I offered you that, how many people will come to my army? And that's what they do in these places. Then I discovered that when Saddam Hussein was found by the American forces, and there's a photograph of him coming out of a rabbit hole or a foxhole there where he's underground, yeah? People who live in the area say that's weird, because the time of year he was caught, there should be no dates on the date palms. But there's dates on the date palms, meaning it was the wrong time of year according to their picture that they tell us. I believe now that a guy like Saddam Hussein is an actor on the world stage. And even with Gaddafi, that when it was his time to leave the world stage, they made it look like he was dead, but he doesn't necessarily need to die. I think these people are all in the game. I mean, I'm not absolutely certain on say Gaddafi, because he was doing such good things in his country. Providing people with like big loans or gifts when they got married, they would get $50,000 towards their house. Petrol was 10 cents a litre. He was building this big underground aqueduct, which was going to serve a big part of Africa. He was coming up with this his own gold currency trading that he was coming out with. So maybe he was once one in the team, and then he thought, you know what, I'm powerful enough. I don't need the Americans. I don't need the British. I don't need the game. I'm going to just make this country great for my people. So it may be that he had to get taken out, and maybe he really did die. But they don't have to.
How do you think we move away from a system? Obviously, government is a prevalent thing in every country around the world, run in many different ways.
Yes.
But there's elitism and there's all sorts of corruption. And how do we move away from that as a society?
Okay, great question, actually.
Because it's not like you can vote a government out.
No, you can't, and it's the status quo, and the status quo is what the majority believe. So the majority believe that we're in a democracy, and the way that democracy works is the way it works, right? So it's really such a good question. But the truth is that we may never be able to, in our lifetimes, remove the system as it is. This is not necessarily about wanting to go to Downing Street and knock the gates down and say you guys are all lying to us about everything. This is more about you individually saying, wow, maybe I'm not the Darwinist evolution, Big Bang monkey evolved bullshit that they taught me in school. I am something much more special. That whatever is here is part of a school, not only for my entertainment, but for my learning, my higher learning, my soul or higher self learning. I think that's what we're here to do. So even if we can't change the game, it's almost like visiting Disneyland and saying, oh, well, I think Walt Disney should change this ride, Jane. No, these are the rides that are there, and maybe we just have to kind of go enjoy the rides, come out with a gold badge going, shit, you handled the worst of the rides and all of that.
So do you think we should add more regulation on who becomes a politician or a PM or a MP or whatever system, or a governor?
The truth is, my friend, that actually money talks. So people who come from money, often their children go to the right school, they're connected to the right club, and therefore, long before we vote for someone to become Prime Minister, that somewhere in a room back somewhere, someone has said, this is the guy or girl, and this person is going to take that place.
Said the exact same thing a couple of days ago.
Yeah, and because we control the media, left and right wing, we control the media, we'll get enough bad press and enough good press such that that person ends up. You don't even have to doctor the votes. With right media, you can control what people do in terms of their voting.
Do you think it's up to the corporate leaders of the rich, such as, I don't know, Elon Musk, for example, who has the whole stake of Twitter, is now becoming more mainstream than mainstream media? Do you think it's up to them to be the people
That's
who make change?
another great question. What's your name?
Because
Jack.
Yeah.
That's a really good question. Okay, so I hate to burst people's bubbles, but I guess that's what I do here, and that is that Elon Musk is deep state, and he is being offered to us as the Iron Man, the savior of humanity. In fact, the guy who took us to the moon, a guy called Werner von Braun, who came to America under Operation Paperclip, he wrote a book in the 1950s talking about a guy called Elon taking mankind to Mars. And now, how is that? 1956, 1954. A guy, Elon's an unusual name. And to write a book about a guy called Elon and the people called the Elons who believe this guy and they go to Mars, the first people to Mars, yes, then is it possibly a coincidence? He writes on his tombstone, Psalms 19:1, that the heavens showeth God's firmament, the handiwork. So there's so much evidence that this stuff isn't possible. This stuff isn't real. So where was I going with that? So Elon, yeah.
So you think it's up to
I think
these
he's being.
people to make change?
I think he's being offered just like Russell Brand. He's being offered as the kind of the go-to guy who's going to address that. And maybe one day we'll get to a point where we go, we can't trust the political process. We're going to elect someone like Elon to be the head of the council because he is Superman.
You say it's deep state, right?
Yes.
There's evidence that would say that yes, because he gets the NASA contracts, because he gets the launch pads, because he's the favourable one in terms of SpaceX.
Yeah.
But then if you look at his Tesla, we're in an environment where the WEF is saying that global warming shifts in heat waves and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And he's the head of the largest high stock share company in the electric vehicle market. But he doesn't even get a seat at the regulation table, such as Ford. I think there's two, General Motors and one more, I think.
Right.
But he doesn't get a seat at that table. So there's favourites one place. I would say it's two in the middle to say that it's deep state.
Okay, did you know that Tesla was already a company in existence before he bought the 11% shares? No, he only bought 11% of it. He doesn't own it. And what I like to remind people is that he sold PayPal for somewhere between $300 and $400 million. Mm-hmm. That's the story, right?
Yeah.
Now, $300 to $400 million is about 1 week of what NASA spends.
Mm-hmm.
So how is a guy going to come with 1 week of what NASA spends and then do more than they can do? That's his total wealth. Now you could say, he leveraged money and NASA have given him money and so on. I agree with that. But it's like, so the government is essentially paying him, and I'm saying he's deep state. Well, he's being paid by the government to do more than NASA can do. So it does beg that question. He put a car in space. You probably know about that. He put a Tesla in.
The Model 3.
Yeah, and he said, I didn't alter it at all, and it looks so fake, it must be real. He said that himself. He said if we were doing this as CGI, we'd do it much better. But he said it does look so fake, it must be real. So, and he said, I didn't alter that car at all.
Cameras in space, because the lenses that they use, they have to, because there's so much light pollution in space.
What would happen if I put a pneumatic tire in a vacuum chamber? Why didn't his car's vacuum tires explode?
Well, they would have considered that the same way that why a fuel tank doesn't explode.
Well, let me tell you, Jack, in the same press conference that he said it looked so fake, he also said we didn't alter that car at all. It is a bog standard model. So you agree with me that in real world physics, if you take a pressurized system and put it in a vacuum, it's going to rupture. That's why the NASA vacuum chamber has got 8-foot thick reinforced walls, because it will crush itself in, and they can only get to Torr 6. and the vacuum of space is Tor 23 or something. So it is a far greater vacuum, and they've never even put the man in the spacesuit in a vacuum chamber. And these are things that you've got to go and look for yourself and go, shit, that's a good question. I would definitely want to test my spacesuit.
Tell us about the flat Earth.
Yeah, because it says, I've read somewhere that it's a plane, not a...
Yeah, it's an electromagnetic plane. So if you look at the primer field experiments, Jack, there's a guy called David LaPointe. But if you go and look on these on YouTube, he takes a vacuum chamber, puts two oppositely charged magnetic balls against each other. They support it on a filament, and then he fires a 80,000, 90,000 volt charge into that, and he gets what he calls the accretion layer that forms. And you can drop iron balls into this, and they form in the flower of life pattern. The more he drops in, they just rearrange themselves in this flower of life, and they start to rotate like this. So I say to people that might well be the Earth that we live on, is this accretion disk in between two magnetic centers, poles. And where we stand is that compression of light, so that light can become material, because we're not actually material beings, we're a frequency. As Tesla said, if you want to understand the secrets of the universe, think in terms of light, sound and vibration. We are just vibration, and we're interpreting that as skin and grass and metal and so on, but everything is frequency. And if you study a bit of quantum, the possibility that we're actually inside an electromagnetic torus that is spinning all the time.
So what is the goal of teaching us that everything is spherical or almost spherical? What is the goal or the intention
what would they
behind
benefit?
that?
Who benefits from that, teaching the whole world that the Earth is round and it spins?
Well, because it minimizes us by factors, orders of magnitude. Well, because on a flat Earth and that is enclosed, it's created.
Do you think that the Earth is just like one surface?
No, so the sea...
Or do you think there's...
I don't know about underneath. I can't say about underneath. It's almost like if I took a balloon, filled it up with air, and put some water in and some stones.
Yeah.
What would happen? The stones would settle. The water would just, if the stones were lower than above the water level, we call those continents. And then the gaseous bit would be the spot on top. So what's underneath the stones, I can't tell you. We've only drilled 8 miles into the Earth, so we don't actually know what's beneath our feet very far. Certainly, we don't know what's core and all that stuff we're taught in school. All of those are drawings, because there is no way.
Further down with not LiDAR, it's a special laser.
Yes.
And it's all sediments and layers.
Yeah. But again, like if I can't drill past it.
What's at the edge?
Well, okay, let me put it to you like this. So to answer that, Jack, is that I think that it's, so think about an electromagnetic apple. Yeah, and a torus is like an apple shape. Yeah. So if I had to cut that apple open, firstly, let me mention that the fruit is always on the inside of the skin, the bark, the peel, the shell, always. But if I cut that open and let it fall open, what do I see? I see a seed pod, which is the only solid part of that fruit. The rest of it is wet, it's all water. Well, what do you see? You see these continents, which are the seed pod, around which is water, and at the edge, extremity of that would be enclosure, inside of an egg, inside of an electromagnetic torus. Can we get outside of that? I think that things break down to a point that we can't. So when they discovered this in the 1950s, they signed the Antarctic Treaty, which stops average people from going beyond the 60th south parallel, which is a vast amount of the so-called globe or flat Earth. And so when you go to the Antarctic shelf, you can only go on a guided tour. You can only go to this place, travel around there.
So you're telling me that's the only spot at the edge of the flat Earth surface? So
yeah, what happens
there's a whole circumference.
That would be, yeah, so a little bit like this.
Okay, let's say there's a circumference of the circle, right?
Can you imagine I've taken the orange and I've cut it open like this and I've flipped it open. So these are the seeds at the middle of the orange.
Are you telling me it's like a semicircle shape then? Or you think it's completely flat?
No, don't, no, well, I'm just saying what is in nature. Nature is pawpaws and oranges, apples and round things, yeah?
Yes.
So I'm saying it's probably round. I can't prove that, but I'm saying when we look at an electromagnetic torus, it is an oblate spheroid, like they tell us, but we're not on the outside hanging on the bottom of it. We're inside on a plane where there is one sea level. You know, when you travel from Bournemouth to the west coast of this country, you will travel up 300, 400 meters. And then to get to Western Supermare, you will travel down 400 meters.
Yeah.
And so it's the same level. And I could do that example in Africa or America and say it's the same sea level. In fact, USGS admits that there's a 9-inch difference between the Pacific and the Atlantic on the two sides of America.
Okay.
So to travel 3,000 miles, and when your teacher...
Saying there's a spherical electromagnetic field and we're right in the center of it.
Yes, but where things materialize, where light turns into matter, there is this moment where there is this order of light things go up, heavy things settle down. And as with the example of the balloon, yes, we see that the hottest stuff is beneath our feet, the coldest and the lightest stuff is above our heads.
What makes you think that the globe theory is incorrect or false?
Well, I mean, aside from
catching
the NASA out on so many deceptions, aside from that,
saying, what evidence have you seen that you believe
Yeah.
that it's actually that it's not a spherical globe?
well, so there's no experiment that shows we're spinning, and there's no experiment that will prove the measurable curvature over the surface. You're not hearing my answer.
Is there an
You're not.
experiment that says there isn't?
No. Well, if the science is making the claim that we're spinning, show me, because I don't feel it. If you feel it, point the direction we're spinning now, and you can't, because none of us can. But when we're young, we're told that you can't feel it because you're too insignificant. So that's the one thing. And Einstein himself said we won't find an experiment that proves that we're spinning. Back in the mid-1800s, George Airy, who was the astronomer royal, he came up with an experiment that was to prove whether it was the Earth or the stars that were moving. And they call it today Airy's failure, because it showed that the stars were moving. Then in the late 1800s, early 1900s, they spent 30 years, the best scientists in the world, using a device called the interferometer that they developed to measure whether or not the Earth was moving, and they couldn't find this spin, right? So there is no proof, and the positive claim is for those who say that balls of stone can float. The burden relies on them, because we all know intelligently that if I throw a ball up, it will fall back down. That if I let gas go, whether it be from my backside or from a can, it is going to dissipate into the environment evenly and in any random way. Wind will obviously have an effect on that. But so that's what we see in reality. But we're told to believe when we're young that actually, no, under its own weight, this gas called Jupiter is going to attract moons, and it's just gas.
It's not just gas. It's mineral as well.
Okay. I won't debate that.
Yeah.
You know, for me, when I see the stars now under a P900 Jack or a P1000 Nikon camera, and you can go and YouTube these yourself. But when people slow down their footage of these stars, what you see is sonoluminescence. What you see is vibration, called cymatics. Cymatics is where you take a sound plate and you shake it with a certain frequency, and as you change the frequency, so you get these beautiful designs reforming and reforming. But every time I go back to 138 hertz, it'll go back to exactly the same pattern that it was before when I was at 138. So what I think that we're seeing is, when we look at these stars, we're seeing resonant frequencies inside possibly a liquid, like the star in a jar experiment, where it's just a frequency that's creating its own cymatic pattern. And when you look at these, the different stars, you'll notice, and we've got one of the pictures here, the different stars all come up differently. You see, they don't look like they're all coming through the same atmosphere. They're coming up in different colors. They're coming up, but if it's Mars always comes up red. Mars always comes up red. It doesn't matter where you picture it, it'll always be red. Whereas others will come up green, others will come up rainbow colors, some will come up white. This is what we see. And when you study solar...
Mars is a planet and these are stars.
Sorry?
Mars is a planet and these are stars.
Well, these are all, the stars in the sky are all pretty much the same thing.
Yeah, but you're comparing it to Mars, which is a planet.
No, you're
Said
claiming that...
Mars is always red.
Yeah, but the light that I see is red. Well,
across the spectrum.
Well, I mean, we can see stars that are, or planets that are close to us, relatively speaking, and we can see 50 light years away stuff that's coming from, and these are all seemingly doing their own vibratory signature. So the idea that these are rocks floating in space, you were given when you were 7 years old. You have no proof of that. It was indoctrinated into all of us at a young age before we could test that and question that for ourselves.
Okay, and
Now,
so what if people believe that?
So how does what I'm failing to understand is how it diminishes us as...
Yeah, like,
Okay,
so
well,
now I
the
believe
size
this
thing,
planet,
we're capped out, like
well,
we can't leave this planet.
okay, so there's aliens, for someone who believes these are planets, there's aliens that are far more
if we
advanced than
exist,
us.
Why couldn't aliens exist? We exist.
Yes.
So
Family
why
paradox.
can't...
Well, there could be other people on a flat Earth too. See, on a flat Earth, the plane could be much larger and there could be continents that are hidden. So is it possible that there is extraterrestrials from extra Earth? Yeah, that's possible.
On the same Earth that we're on right now.
Yeah, but not necessarily inhabiting this particularly 5 continents that we know.
About like a multiverse or a different plane.
Well, the multiverse, my theory on the multiverse is that we are, each of us, a unique universe. You and I verse. You and I create, like they say in the Bible, that God created the world by his own words, by speaking. Well, we are speaking our reality into existence. And the more I can control what you speak and think, then the more I can control your reality.
Confirmation bias.
So that's what I think that is going on, is that we might be unique, we might be the multiverse. We might be that.
Was it NASA that fabricated this, or was it?
NASA is just a peon of the government, and the government is a peon, PR department of something else. Now, some people say it's like otherworldly. It is some kind of alien, higher technology or people that are controlling us through this thing. This is what some people say. I don't know, to be honest. All roads tend to lead to Rome, so Vatican seems to be involved.
Telling us that there's planets if there isn't.
The people who are pushing the evolution, and you're not important. Truly, I was an evolutionist. I was a Darwinist.
Why does evolution mean we're not important?
You kidding? It's because.
I believe I'm important. I believe.
Yeah, I know, but it's got to be, in my view, honestly, because I was 47, and I didn't believe in God. And I believed in evolution, and I believed in Big Bang.
You can believe in God and evolution.
I didn't believe in God.
You can believe in both.
I know you can, but for me, what I say to people is that's diminishing God. Because you see, if you do not believe, let me give you my answer. I know what you think. Let me tell you what I think. Is that if God intended for you to come, or if your higher self intended for you to come in this avatar, to wait 4 billion years or 20 billion years, whatever they're saying now is the age of the universe, to wait 20 billion years, throw a whole lot of rocks together and explosions, and then hope that you're going to come out in this magnificent form, is like throwing a grenade into a scrapyard and expecting a Ferrari to ride out.
I hear you, brother, because you're
right. Yeah, man.
I hear you.
Thank you.
Heliocentrism. I hear
Heliocentrism, yeah. That's all sun worship, heliocentrism. Yes. Sweet, man.
Isn't that the beautiful thing about it, is that life can persist through anything? If life is contained to us as humans.
Okay. I mean, I'm not going to argue with you guys. I'm just telling you that I came from my dying mother. My dying mother in 2011 could not get me to accept that there was something higher here. Truly. And then I did DMT in 2015, and I saw that I am something much more than this material Darwinist that I believed that I was. And so Big Bang, which is a Catholic invention, is, from my view, is a sort of demeaning, because it's like saying, yes, God didn't have the intention for you to come as beautiful as you are. It was just like, let's just kick an explosion in there and see what happens. Well, that's not the same. That's not divine like intent, right? That's just like, oh, let's see, happenstance, Goldilocks.
What I believe is that makes us so special. That of all the possibilities of what I could have been or could have not been, I ended up here in this moment in time.
Okay.
I think that's what makes me special.
Okay. Well, let's agree to disagree.
No,
I
I'm
think,
not asking to change your mind. I'm asking your point of view of what I think.
Yeah. No, I feel like this is why I come out and do it, is because I raised older children to university level, insisting that they were evolved monkeys, insisting on that. And when I found this truth for myself, I realized, wow, I am, and it doesn't make me any different from you, but I am the reason that I'm here is because my higher self intended for me to be here, and intended for me to have this experience and to come and walk this path, whatever that might mean. And for me, it's a far more beautiful centering thing, that actually, even like with the zodiacal signs, how much closer they are to us in the flat earth model, because they're actually intimate. It's almost like the pith of the orange is feeding the fruit. And the same is true with the pith that I believe is our roof, is feeding you. It's feeding us, and when there's alignments of those stars, it does different things for each of us depending on when and how at time we're born and so on. So I think so for me, Flat Earth really made this stuff a lot more relevant to me, and now I'm far more interested in astrology than I was before, because I think that yes, these things are connected to us.
So those things basically make you feel, I don't mean this in a demeaning way, but it makes you feel secure in the person you are,
that you have
having
meaning,
these theories.
That there is, well, I mean, it really edified the purpose of my life, because I was just like most other people, a father, and going along with the job and doing all of those things. But when I realized that, wow, there is some divine thing going on here, and that there is something divine, loving, much greater, more powerful than me, that intended for me to be here. But I don't think my wife didn't like this when I went back. I was on a book tour in Johannesburg, and when I did the DMT in 2015, and I went back and I said, this message I kept getting given during the DMT, it was only 7 minutes, but that nothing here matters. That nothing on this place matters. So it doesn't matter, like the religions will have you go, you're a sinner, you this and that. And no, nothing here matters. Look, if you're unhappy in your life, then you need to make some changes, right? Individually, yes. Yeah. But nothing here matters. And we're not going to be punished when we leave this place, or it's not bad if you want to believe that you came from monkeys or anything like that. Yeah. I just feel like the reason I would lie to you is to control you in some way. Yeah. And the question is why and what would be the purpose of that? And of course, I'm not the guy who did that, or I'm not the entity that did that. I'm just offering, this is how I think it matters to each of us, that it has some sort of soul, in the same way as religion has this way of, I came up through a Christian religion, it has this way of sort of putting distance between you and your essence, your God, your higher self, whereas in fact you are speaking, I am right now speaking for and on behalf of, and I try and live my life knowing that I'm honoring my higher self and ultimately God, whatever God is.
And what do you think happens after this life?
I'm not sure. My preferred theory is that you wake up from the dream and you go, shit, that was a funny old day. I was there 75, 80 years and that was crazy.
I'm interested in the theory that you have to, that your spirit, your soul, has to go through different stages to prepare to be put on this earth.
Yes.
To then do something, and then you have to achieve something on this life, this life. And if you don't achieve it, you can come back until you achieve it.
Like a Buddhist.
I quite like that perspective.
I do too.
I don't know what I believe, but I like that perspective.
And in an electromagnetic torus system, then it's constantly feeding itself, like the infinity symbol or the Ouroboros snake. It's kind of constantly feeding itself. So that fits with the reincarnation cycle, is that when in quantum physics, our energy is departing all the time and being topped up with new energy. Our body is recycling itself every few years. And so it feels to me like, okay, when this body is finished, then your soul will continue that journey and then pick up a new avatar and come back in. Does your experience the next time around have some vibration or frequency or resonance from what happened before in the previous life? Maybe it does. Yes. But I don't like to tell people that, if you don't do this and if you don't do that, then it's going to mean this and that, because I don't know that.
But everyone has their own journey to explore and discover what's meant for them in this life.
And they shouldn't do it out of fear. They shouldn't do it out of like, if daddy sees you doing that, then it should be like, listen, go and do the thing. If you're going to scrape your knees, you might learn not to scrape your knees next time.
But don't you think some control is good in a sense?
At what age are we talking about? Because
obviously that there's control implemented in us from a young age to shape us and mold us into the beings we are today.
Well, I don't disagree entirely with that, but I also think that the problem is that if your parents, or not yours, but previous generations' parents were weaponized, were traumatized by wars and famine or hardship or whatever, they're naturally going to carry that vibration into their children.
Trauma.
Absolutely.
And it does carry
on. My wife talks a lot about that and coaches people on that topic. And we're carrying this trauma. So when I chastise my child, for example, am I doing that based on what is the best and loving route for him, or am I doing that based on what did my trauma teach me to do?
It's like if your parents shouted at you for breaking the glass, you might then do the same thing to your child without thinking. But maybe the best way now is to say, it's all right, we'll just clean it up.
Yeah, we won't worry about nothing here matters. And it's only a material thing.
Could be because for them, for your parents, that was a big deal back then. Because maybe
another glass. They
couldn't afford another glass, for example.
Exactly right. So,
or even wasting food is another good example. If grandparents of grandparents live through poverty, that's going to carry on through generations.
So loving ourselves and loving our neighbor is pretty much the golden rule. Treating each other with respect and that kind of thing. So that's really what you want to inculcate in a child, and obviously an ethic of, maybe good work ethic or whatever, or willingness to, rather than that, even like I got a 6-year-old, even with that, it's like if I find a thing that he's really passionate about, he'll spend a long time doing that thing. And maybe in 20 years' time, he will go and engineer that thing or medical that thing or whatever. So you allow them to naturally find their own way. But the more that I impose my restrictions and constraints onto you, the less you are you. The more you are what I want you to be. So there is the trying to find
that.
Limits.
You have to find a balance.
Well, and if the child is now smashing all of the glasses on the floor and thinking it's a big fun, that's a different thing than he accidentally knocked it over. Kind of thing.
So if your child wants to grow up to be a graffiti artist.
Well then you would encourage Oh, look at me! My son sees me going
I know,
around putting all this on the.
that's why I said
Well
that.
done. Well, but it's about it's about letting you flourish in the same way as like if you were growing a flower in the garden. How much are you going to poke and prod, or are you going to? Okay, I'll give it the right amount of water, the right amount of light. If there's a heavy storm, I'm going to bring it indoors to protect it until it's strong, blah, blah, blah. This is what you want to do with your young, is nurture them, but allow them to grow the way that the tree always wanted to grow, rather than trying to prune it so much that it's never, Yeah. A little pruning is good, so it can, and so it's about getting the balance right, but doing it, I guess, from a loving place and not wanting to create that scarcity, lack, fear, which is what they did in the last 3 years, was made a lot of people fearful.
In terms of the pandemic.
Yeah, this make people fearful, because when you're fearful, then you're no longer going to behave normally. You're gonna shake people's hand with your elbow, and all of that sort of stuff.
But
Anyway,
things are going back to normal now.
huh?
Things are going back to normal.
Yeah. I mean, in a way, yeah. But I don't really want to go down that rabbit hole too much. But I do think that there was that could be a training.
It was a strange time.
Yeah, but I think it was a practice run for something that's coming.
I read a lot about that. Yeah, I did read a lot into that.
Yeah.
No, I worked in healthcare at the time, so I had a different experience to most people. So I saw some things that other people haven't seen.
Yeah.
But it is.
There was some weird stuff going on in the medical side. I know. I've spoken to a lot of people.
I didn't work in the medical side. I worked in the care side. So
Okay.
I worked in healthcare.
Okay.
And I saw it firsthand.
Yeah.
But I was still never affected. So I worked with COVID patients.
Yeah.
Over 50 of them, and over
Right.
10.
Yeah. Because this idea that we can make each other sick, if you're working in care, you've never, certainly 3 years ago, you would never have thought, oh, I wonder if Betty's a little unwell today because she may make me unwell. That's never happened.
No, it has. We always have thought that way. Like if I don't know, a patient has some sort of bug, then like we know that we have to wear PPE. That's always been a thing in the healthcare industry.
Because my mom was an intensive care nurse for 20 years of my childhood, and we were never sick. She never brought illness home as part of her job. But even though I know that there was some weird stuff that happened during the 2020, when you go and look at the total baseline death rates in these countries, you find that they were near enough the same, certainly not pandemic worthy or calling of a lockdown worthy, shall we say. But today, when you look at the death rate in this country, particularly amongst younger people, it's 10%, 15% higher than it was back 5 years ago, or even in the pandemic. So
Why do you think that is? Or has there been any theories about why that is?
Well, I mean, the theories are, your body needs sunlight, it needs fresh air, it needs getting together with other people. It needs not to be in fear, because if I can make you fearful, I can actually make you sick. Then we started to do all sorts of things that we hadn't done before. Like men who wash their hands once a day were like, gelling up 15 times a day. Look at me with my, I carry it around on my hip like a gun. I got my like anti. Well, that stuff is being absorbed by the body.
Of course, but also now like we're more likely to be sick because we haven't been exposed to the elements for so long.
Yeah, and there's a thing called the herd immunity of if I'm around you, then whatever you've got, I've got, and we share it, right? And that makes us more robust.
I agree with that holistically.
But then now, so with some people are saying, doctors are saying that they're seeing a real uptick in myocarditis, heart-related blockages, strokes, things like that. And this is
first-hand experience with that.
Right, and this is linked to the needle.
Yeah.
This is what the medics are saying. Is
that's the thing. There's correlation, but we haven't proven causation yet.
I know, and if I was in the medical industry and I was the people who were running the game, they're never going to allow for that. They'd rather say, they'd rather say anything else. And actually, you know how they did it with the pandemic. In the pandemic year, they every night on the news, this is how many people have got it today, right? Yeah. So that's almost like being at war. Today, our boys on the front line, there was 500 of them that went down in an attack and blah, blah, blah. They want you to be thinking about that all the time. Now, today, even though the week on week, by comparison to 2020, is higher, total death rate, and particularly amongst young people, which is a surprise, they're not talking about it at all. So that in itself is a red flag to say, why are they not talking about that? Because you should be raising this as a red flag, because it's worse than it was in 2020.
Media's always been picking and choosing what they speak
Media
about.
works for the government, or media is an extension of the government. There is no such thing as free press, and Operation Mockingbird was proven to be, in 1977, was putting CIA into the media. There's no reason why MI6 wouldn't be doing the same thing here, or
We know
MI5.
someone who spoke on TV during the Syria-Turkey earthquake,
Oh, yeah.
and they spoke, and it was a Turkish channel, and they dubbed over what they were saying, completely changed the words.
Really?
Completely changed.
Are you Turkish or?
No,
Oh.
not from Iraq.
Iraq? Oh, okay.
That's
Wow.
why I asked.
Wow.
I was just
Wow. Wow.
I've got a question, but it kind of deviates a little bit from the vaccine thing. What are your opinions on the Robert Kennedy? Because I think he, someone who used to be liberal but now has moved more conservative, just generally over time during the pandemic and stuff like that. He's someone who's an older liberal who says he's liberal but has a lot of conservative ideals. Do you think he's deep state, or would you say he's actually truthful and thoughtful in what he's saying?
Yeah, the former. I think he's deep state. In fact, I think
even though that both his uncle and his dad were supposedly assassinated.
Yeah, I'm glad you used the word supposedly, because I'm not sure I used to believe that. But now, you discover that a guy was killed on the same day in Texas, in the same city, in Dallas, but he was a policeman, and he was shot in a random shooting in the face. And he was known in the Dallas police force as JFK because he looked just like JFK. So is it possible that a cadaver, a body, was garnered on the same day so that the coroners would have a body, face damaged, destroyed, that they could say this is JFK? So my honest opinion is that I don't think that if you're an actor for the system, if you were paying me to play out a role, then you'd come to me and say, Dave, you've done your part now. We're going to have to cut you out. This is how we're going to do it. Just like they do on EastEnders or whatever on the TV. We're going to have to cut you out, and this is the storyline about how we're going to do it. And I think that's why we've never had the truth about what really happened with Harvey Oswald, about who the number of shooters and all of the conspiracies that surround that. We've never had the truth ever. And I used to believe that's because it was an inside job, that they'd done it on purpose. It was the powers that be had wiped him out, or the mafia or whatever, but they didn't want us to know.
It could be true that they did want to kill him, and the CIA was in on it because he was ending the Vietnam War, and this was before the Korean War. They didn't want him as a leader.
Yeah. I mean, I would consider that, and I can't say absolutely that he didn't get taken out in that shot, but there is this Sabruta footage which is spliced in at the end, and it does seem as though there's a lot of things that make no sense. And having been in war myself and seen people get shot, watching how his head goes and so on, I much favor the idea of being a studio exploding a pumpkin kind of thing. But and he's also credited with trying to bring in the greenback, because it was said that he was against the Federal Reserve, which is not it's not an American government thing, it's a private thing. So he was trying to bring in the greenback. This is one of the stories that goes in his favor. But for me, as a flat earther, then he was trying to take us to the moon, even though we must have known by that point that we couldn't get out, because the whole creation of the moon fabrication, NASA and so on, was to perpetuate the story of evolution or control or whatever. So I feel like he was always an agent, going along with the play. Does that mean that his brother was also taken out and then taken to the same place that these guys tend to go to? Yeah, altogether possible. But no, I mean, it's a fair point about Robert Kennedy. But however, Robert Kennedy Jr. is not asking the questions that I'm asking, which is to say, let's look at the headline numbers. In the UK, I pulled off 100 years, and I did this within months of the start of the pandemic. I went onto the government's website, pulled off 100 years of death for this country, and it wasn't stacking up. It was like 1985 more people were dying per month than there are this in 2020. What are we doing? So anyone with a common sense, I went to spend a year in South Africa, and I pulled their death stats off, and they have 550,000 people die on average every year. And in the year of the pandemic, 556,000. It's the same number. It's the same number, from a 60 million population for it to fluctuate by 0.2%. It's not, none of them are going back. If they were legit, they would say, hold on, you guys called a pandemic on zero evidence of that. What you did, and what there's evidence of you doing, is you were paying marketing companies to frighten the hell out of people, to find every wedge that you could. And doctors were being paid to incentivized to call someone a COVID death rather than just pneumonia or whatever.
I do agree with that.
You've seen that.
Not in this country, but yes, I've seen evidence of that.
Yeah. And so it would be like, no, if we really had a pandemic, guys, we wouldn't need to fudge it. It would be like, listen, look at my phone book. I've taken 10 numbers out this last month of friends who died.
Yeah.
That's, and not only that, 3 people in each household all got it, and they're all gone. Never saw any of that. And so when anyone comes onto the public stage and doesn't call out the whole thing as a complete scam against humanity, a crime against humanity, because you must have seen this in the caring industry, and what really freaked me out in the first few months was that, look at what you're doing to the old people. Old people are dying by themselves.
I worked in a nursing home. That's the sector I worked in, a care home for
Yeah.
elderly.
Loved ones, grandchildren cannot visit me anymore. Now, I went through the war, and you're telling me that my grandchildren can't come visit me. Do you know how angry, frightened that's going to make me? And it might even end my life sooner. And I believe, because the only real blip in 2020 in the death rate in this country was over 85. There was like that was like up. So I'm thinking, well, what could have caused that? Do you think possibly cutting all of those surgeries out, shunting people from hospital wards into care homes?
I think that definitely did have an effect, because a lot of major surgeries that people required were pushed off
Yeah.
and delayed
Yeah.
because of
Yeah.
the pandemic and the
Yeah.
increased numbers of people in
Yeah.
hospitals.
Yeah. So it's not hard to find. If you
But
know
at
this,
the same time, also, a normal illness or normal infection, like a day-to-day illness, will or could potentially kill someone over 85 that wouldn't
Yes.
kill someone my age or your age.
Absolutely.
As always,
we
as
understand
any
that.
influenza in general,
Yes.
let alone COVID.
yes.
But let's say I've seen things that make me believe certain things.
Okay.
I do believe that there was an effect of the pandemic on the over
Okay.
85s, but I didn't see an effect on anyone our age group,
Yeah.
my age.
So if we're in an electromagnetic universe, and this, have you heard of the Schumann resonance? Schumann resonance, I only measured in Russia, but it's actually the Earth is giving off a harmonic, a frequency, and it's called the Schumann resonance. And people have been monitoring this for years. And it's possible that if we're in an electromagnetic system, that if I put a frequency, a new tone into that system, then some people will find that dissonant. Some people will fall over and go, there could be a sound, for example, like dogs can hear something that we can't hear, or there could be a sound, for example, that some people are going, oh, can you hear that? And you go, no, I can't hear that at all. Well, your body is this receiver, and if it's receiving a frequency that is off at it, then it might push you into dis-ease. If you're right on the cusp, because really the most people that we saw any increase in death was to be with comorbidities. People who already had something else wrong with them, plus this, then that, yeah? But they were never getting that from the guy next door or from the neighbor, or you never got it from anybody, because, it's not a transmissible thing. It's a thing that's happening in your own energy system. But we're inside a meta-energy system, and that meta-energy system is talking to us all the time. And something changed at that time, and they knew that this was going to cause a major upswelling in all of a sudden people getting sick. But perhaps they didn't know how much, which is why they built these Nightingale hospitals, none of which really ever got used, because they were thinking this is going to cause a major thing. But this germ theory of I can pass you my germs and make you sick, they call it theory because it's also not proven. Even Louis Pasteur, who's claimed to be the father of germ theory, he claims on his deathbed, there's people around him say that he was saying it's not about the germs, it's about the environment. Terrain theory is more prevalent in my mind, i.e. if we stand here until it's 3 a.m. and we're both all freezing cold, there's a good chance tomorrow or the day after we might get a cold, we might get sick here, because we've changed our terrain. We're normally in bed at 10 o'clock, eating a good meal and whatever. No, we stood here and drank Red Bull until 3 a.m, freezing and partying or whatever. And then there's a chance that I will get sick, which is why when I go on a plane, sometimes it's a long flight, I don't sleep, I'm in bad air, there's a good chance that I'm going to get sick, but it doesn't mean I got it from the person next to me on the plane.
Because if you stay in bed for a week straight without seeing anyone, sitting in the darkness, you are going to get sick. 100%.
Yeah.
But who have you caught it from?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
No, I agree with that.
So your own condition is really an effect of your own environmental conditions.
What do you
you
think
eat.
of the theory that it's due to the global warming, obviously, that affects it's having on nature, and that they did the pandemic to give nature a chance to sort of come back a little bit?
I don't think that. And one of the things I used to say long before the COVID thing was that I'd say to people, this we're ruining the atmosphere is something that I've heard for most of my life. But yet, on a spring morning or many mornings, depending on where you are, or most places I ever wake up, I go outside at dawn, the air is perfectly clean. And unless I'm right next to the factory that's still polluting all night, then I won't smell anything other than the air is perfectly clean. So I believe that this earth cleans itself. Just in the same way as you can smoke and your lungs actually will clean themselves, you know.
degree.
To a degree. After 50, 60, 70 years or whatever, our lungs, whatever. But I don't believe that mankind has the power to do as much to the atmosphere as, say, a cigarette. No, I smoke myself. I'm not giving you a hard time. But
No, I know.
but I don't. I think that this.
Have enough power and numbers to be able to do that.
I really don't believe that. I don't.
It's like
I don't really do.
the whole, you know, don't drive as much, take buses, take this. But it's not the people, it's not me, an individual. If all of us stop doing all these bad habits, that's
It's
not going to
like-
fix the problem. It's all these big factories.
You're individualising the problem.
and
not-
it's these factories that are telling
Yeah.
us stop
Yeah.
using plastic,
Yes.
reuse,
Yes.
don't use straws. But it's not us that's making the biggest damage on
No,
the earth.
but they always want to make you
Of course.
and me the culprit.
Yeah.
So
why-
I'm responsible
Yeah.
for a climate change that I
Like
can't
the
even
ocean
prove.
waste,
Yes,
that's not us.
yes. No, I mean, and we, of course, we should want to.
have a little
Yeah,
effect on it,
we
but
we
it's not us.
we should want to keep our gardens clean
Yeah.
in the same way as we want to keep our bodies clean. Yes, I think that. But at the same time, yes, to keep finding reasons to punish you, restrict you, limit your movement, or penalize you, charge you more taxes, etc., for all of these things is really just an excuse
Yeah.
to keep the thumb on us, mankind, so that we never move out of, just like in your grandparents' time, it was World War II, rationing, blah, blah, blah. Well, we're in a similar kind of war now, but they're using different mechanisms to punish each other.
Yeah.
So I used to joke that the first two world wars were predominantly against the Germans, the third world war against the germs. But I think that we might be in the early days of another worldwide event that is designed to destabilize, you know, and then the fear that we push onto our children, just like they did with COVID.
I think there's people that have looked into it, and every certain number of years, something big happens.
Yes.
And it's just like, it can't be up to chance and coincidence.
Yeah.
It's not like, oh, this happens and it's not. I
yeah.
do think that there is a higher power,
Yeah.
like a person or a group of people, like a government of sorts, a world
Yeah,
government,
yeah.
that is, you know, constructing
Steering.
things at a certain time because of something.
Yes.
Like, was the pandemic a distraction?
Yes.
Of sorts?
Or a
Because
part of the
things
journey. Yeah, or distraction, or a part of the journey, taking us towards something. You know, that maybe we will look back in 100 years or 50 years or whatever, we'll be able to look back and go, okay, we can see why they did that. It's hard to be sure at this point in time why they're doing it, but it certainly seemed like an exercising of your control systems. You know, if you're going to a war, you've got to practice and train that. In a care setting, you've got to practice and train for that situation when the heart stops, or when that situation. We all know we're going to go there. Well, all the countries in the world, 200 or whatever, they knew how to answer the red phone, and they answered it, and they did the right thing. Or if they didn't, we've learned from that, and next time you will have in place the protocols that shut you down even faster, and so on. So I think that this was all things that have been happening, the world wars, Ukraine, you know, all these things are designed to control the mind, control the mind, and to take us along a particular path. And mankind is going to walk that way. It just seems that the majority are going to be deceived, and that's.
I mean, but at the same time, you know, what can we do to stop it?
Maybe nothing. But when in your life, how can you live your life differently,
I know,
knowing
of course,
that,
as an individual,
and not being caught up in
you
that?
have a choice. You can make a choice of what to believe.
Yeah, but while I'm
and
deceiving
how
you,
that affects you as a person.
but while I'm deceiving you, let's just say I'm saying that I've got margarine here and I've got this other spread here. Now, usually when I say, well, margarine shit, I'll try the other one. Oh yeah, the other one's really good for you. Well, if I'm the deceiver, maybe both of them are bad for you.
Yeah.
You know, and but I'm the one who's got the TV, I've got the newspapers, I've got the ability to control what you think about these people, Putin, you know, whatever, you know. So no, I think it's a big control game, and that we can live in love, we can live in a beautiful way with this world, despite this madness of people are completely, you know, caught up in a brainwash.
We're never going to know
program.
unless we end up in the government ourselves, basically.
Or be
even
your
then,
own government. Be your own government.
No, as in
Government.
we're never going to know what they're trying to do unless we
yes.
end up there ourselves.
I was never seen as a safe pair of hands when I was in government. This is why I would never have got to an office that would have given me enough insight to know what's going on. But I've loved the conversation, Jack, and
Maya.
I'm
Maya.
guessing your name's Eric?
My name is David.
Oh,
David.
David, okay. Just
Nice
read
talking to you.
Likewise, I have a YouTube channel called Trinity
I
4.
already found it. screenshot
Okay,
it.
okay. All right.
You know what? I'm not
Thanks,
trying
Maya.
to change minds or
Yeah.
change my mind, but I like to think about these things. I like to learn.
I've
and
loved the
listen.
conversation with
It's
you
been very
guys.
nice.
It's been
People
stimulating.
need more of this
Yeah,
group thinking.
Yeah.
Too much.
yeah, individuals.
Thank you.
All the best.
Have a good day.
You too. All right.